Welcome back to the show. We continue to talk about some great organizations, and one of those is Veterinarians Without Borders, and they've been doing amazing work for many, many years. And with the war in Ukraine, it's made their work, you can imagine, that much more challenging, that much more difficult, a lot of obstacles when it comes to that. Here to tell us about either the organization itself and some of those challenges, I'm joined by Charmaine Brett. She's the Executive Director of Veterinarians Without Borders. Welcome to the show. Great to have you here. Charmaine, let's talk about Veterinarians Without Borders just in general and the wonderful work that you've been doing for many years, as I said.
So our organization started in 2005, and it was really founded by a group of very passionate, dedicated veterinarians who wanted to change the world. Although we do focus on animals, our mission is really One Health focus. So it's really understanding that humans and animals live in this shared environment, and there's added value to be programming it together. So we work in dozens of countries overseas. We're in northern Canada. We provide remote access to animal health services in Nunavut and Northwest Territories. We've done 10 clinics this year, and we're in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, Ukraine, and we've been responding to the Pakistan floods most recently.
And we're talking about all animals. I mean, as you said, we're not, I think when we think animals, the first thing that always comes to mind, especially when you mention the word veterinarians, is domestic animals, our pets. But it's much more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you're looking at Southeast Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, the livelihoods of people is the larger animals, the pastoralists. There's 1 billion people that are reliant on subsistence farmers, and that brings in Africa, I think it's 75% of the meat protein, 60% of the milk. So it's really, when you're thinking about One Health, how the environment and the animals are connected, without having animal health services, then you're affecting people's livelihoods, driving them into poverty.
Right. Well, and the floods in Pakistan, as you mentioned, that to me, really stands out as, climate change affecting people's daily nutrition, right?
1.2 million animals were killed in those floods, and then the displacement of them. Now you have all of this water around, so we're doing emergency vaccinations and providing displaced families with their animals food for the animals so that they can survive.
Let's turn our attention to the war in Ukraine and the difficulties that we've seen there, and the challenges for Veterinarians Without Borders.
Yeah, so historically speaking, we haven't encountered a war where the animals have been front and center as they were in Ukraine. And when this happened, we immediately mobilized our resources to go in and support. Animals were at the front line, and we quickly developed very strong local partners that were able to provide immediate humanitarian assistance to the animals. To date, we've provided 6 million tons of emergency animal food. We've provided animal medicine. There's a warehouse in Poland that's bringing it into 700 shelters across Ukraine. Wow. So it's a huge operation. We also have set up telehealth services, so being able to connect with veterinarians in Ukraine over video chats, over the phone, and even on WhatsApp, so they can ask questions of things that they're not used to dealing with because of the war situation.
Of course. Veterinarians obviously on the ground as well in Ukraine. Where do they, are they volunteers, all of these veterinarians?
No,
I didn't think so.
Yeah, we're definitely, we want to mobilize the society so that they can become strong again. So we're paying the veterinarians. They're all employed through this service. We also have an additional 30 staff that are employed through our local partners, so really trying to get people back up on their feet.
What about your funding then? Where does your funding come from?
We have had so many generous donations come in from the public.
Nice.
It's been amazing, and we've had a lot of corporations and foundations that have supported us. It's been amazing. It was a huge influx at the beginning, as you can imagine, but as the war has dragged on, we've really seen that there's donor fatigue for sure. Right.
Yeah, and you're not the only organization that I've heard that from. But Giving Tuesday coming up with matching donations. This is a great opportunity for people.
Yeah, exactly. And we're really focusing on right now. So over the past, I think it's been about 6 weeks where there's been massive attacks on Ukraine. About 70% of the country's without electricity right now. So we're moving into winter, and you're looking at 2 to -5 degrees temperatures. So the animals are freezing right now. So we're really trying to focus our annual campaign on getting food in there, generators in there, just blankets for the animals to keep them warm.
One of the other big issues, I guess, is the separation, right, of people and their animals, whether domestic or, farm animals and so forth. Does Veterinarians Without Borders help bring those two parties back together as well?
So when the Ukraine War initially started, we did an assessment. We had 2 amazing veterinarian volunteers that went down to the Polish border. We completely were able to check out who was acting on the ground, where were the gaps, and we immediately found that the gaps were within Ukraine. There was a lot of organizations, European and international, that were helping the animal needs on the border area and helping that connectivity with animals. But what was really happening is the animals that were left in the country didn't have food, didn't have veterinary services. So that's where we doubled down our efforts.
How do you, because you mentioned how many countries you're in, so do you work then specifically with people on the ground in that country that, that are obviously living there, that are practicing there? How do you build those relationships?
Great question. So we believe in localization, which is really working through our local partners. So we have established local partners in the ground in all of our countries that we support and develop so that they can become sustainable organizations that don't need our help anymore. In Northern Canada, we're also working with local partners, but we are doing clinics with animal health services to come into the communities. We did 10 this year. We're able to go into 10 communities in Nunavut and Northwest Territories to provide those animal health services. So it's a bit of a mixed model depending on what's on the ground, but we definitely empower local organizations to be the ones standing in the end.
I imagine the pandemic posed a lot of challenges with, you're going through things like, floods in Pakistan, war in Ukraine, and then you add on top of that the pandemic. How did that affect Veterans Without Borders?
So one of our flagship
Veterinarians, sorry, Without Borders.
One of our flagship programs is volunteer sending. So that, COVID, there's not a lot of volunteers going overseas, and Global Affairs Canada has funded us for so many years to be able to send Canadian volunteers overseas, and we received an amazing flexibility measure that allowed us to bring local volunteers. So we were able to continue programming, and really that's embodying the localization as well. So to this date, we're still having this nice mixed model of having Canadian remote volunteers, helping local volunteers, and also now sending Canadian volunteers over.
Well, appreciate you sharing all of this information with us here today, Charmaine. Thanks so much. And vetswithoutborders.ca to make a donation. Your donation makes a huge difference. We'll be back with more after this.